I'm Bouris and this is Straight Talk.
We've never seen anything like this in human history, where a search engine is so utterly dominant on how we get our information.
Yeah.
And so it's unprecedented and terrifying in a sense that whatever you type in, it's being controlled.
Ben English, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Great to be here.
You're the editor-in-chief of the Daily Telegraph, or all things Telegraph. What does Ben English actually do?
You're doing a million things at once. That's the way it is with a modern newspaper. We don't hold anything back. The industry that's actually in the fight of its life against an onslaught of social media that has no interest in Australian society, has no interest in our welfare, and is just interested in the attention economy. Very untrusting of politicians.
Yeah.
There's got to be something. What's the hidden agenda here?
That would be the least trusted people, I think, in our country right
maybe
now.
Next to me, but yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Ben English, finally. Welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Great to be here.
And I think last time we caught up was in, it's like I'm skyding, was in Vegas. It was at a Greek restaurant, actually.
It was.
Nick was holding, put together a little gathering of people for a Greek restaurant in Vegas, and a number of people there. But we won't disclose who was there, but you and I were there. And I remember Nick went to a lot of trouble with I don't call him the chef or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And but I think it was lost on a lot of people because one of the guests who was sitting there actually didn't want to eat some of the food, and all he wanted to eat was steak and chips.
Yeah. I think you can guess who that was.
Yeah. And poor old Nick, he was like he didn't know what to say. I could see the look on his face. I said, "Man, don't worry, let him have it. It doesn't matter." But you got in a lot of trouble.
He puts thoughts into things, doesn't he?
100%.
Yeah.
And you wonder how people like that.
Yeah.
And then you deal with these people, like obviously you have the Murdochs in your life, and but these individuals are so incredibly busy and so incredibly successful, and so wealthy.
Yeah. Yet
here's a small dinner which probably was getting organised for 3 days.
Yeah, the detail.
Like, I someone like Nick, and we're talking about Nick Politis, otherwise known as Uncle Nick, the chairman of the Roosters team, the club. He told me it's very interesting. Ronnie Coote, as you know, was recently inducted into the NRL's. What I call
Hall of Fame. Actually, as an immortal.
As an immortal, I think 14th or something. I don't know which one he was, but and it was a long time coming for Ronnie Coote. And of course, Ronnie played for the Roosters and he played for South, and which is a pretty big transition between the two clubs. But Nick told me, I said to Nick after it was announced, literally the day after it was announced, have you got Ron's new number because he's not answering my text? Turned out I saw Ron on the weekend, and the reason he didn't answer my text, he told me, is because he got 400 texts. He just was overwhelming.
Yeah.
And Ronnie just turned 80. But Nick told me the day after that he'd already written a letter and sent it to Ron. He wrote a letter.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, why would you write a letter? Who reads letters these days? And, when you can go on text. Well, actually, if a letter arrives at me and I've got 400 texts, but if I get a letter, I'll read the letter.
100%.
And I thought, wow. How insightful is that?
Yeah.
And hopefully I'm giving him his dues and I'm not over egging the whole situation. But for me, I thought that's a pretty thoughtful process.
Yeah.
And
and the art of letter writing is rapidly getting lost.
But it becomes much more special because of that.
Totally. It's the same with me. I remember the letters that I receive, handwritten letters. There's sometimes some that you don't want to read, but there's some really special ones I've received over the years, and they stick out in my mind.
Yeah, I'm the same. When my parents were alive, I used to always make sure I wrote something to them, like Father's Day, Mother's Day, those types of things, birthdays, Christmas. Made sure I wrote something in there, even if it was 1 or 2 paragraphs. You come from this world, a world of communicating through text, because you're the editor-in-chief of the Daily Telegraph, or all things Telegraph, because the Daily Telegraph today incorporates the Sunday Telegraph too, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's everything.
Yeah.
Everything the Telegraph Group produces, that's digitally and the physical form too.
It's all my fault.
Well, it is your fault, and we're going to talk about not being able to get your hands on, the phasing out of newspapers, because I actually still like to get a newspaper.
You're not alone.
At least once a week.
Yep.
I like to read it once a week,
Yep.
if possible. Or if I'm on an aeroplane, I actually like to thumb through the paper on the aeroplane.
Yeah.
Mainly because it's harder to get off your device. But as the editor of the group, what does Ben English actually do? So is it like the old, I think his name was Peter Finch in remember that movie?
Yeah.
What was it called?
Network?
The Network. Yeah. He was sort of sitting there and they're all in the room and you're sitting down and saying, well, we're going to write a story about that and your story's crap. You know, what does the editor do? What do you do, physically do there?
Yeah. There is a bit of that still.
Still a bit of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the tools from about, when I say on the tools, I'm actually looking at the pages on a screen from about 5 p.m. Till 8 p.m. when we go to press. But you know, you're doing a million things at once. That's the way it is with a modern newspaper.
Once upon a time, you used to have your deadline, and it was because you had to print the paper, obviously. So you had to get all the stories actually loaded up onto the print or whatever it was, and the print. So there used to be, I don't know, like 5 or 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
and then
it's fairly similar.
But now it's sort of a bit more continual because there's something new comes up at 9 o'clock. You got to put it up.
We don't hold anything back,
right? So
there's not a story. It's funny. The only it's because it's a complete anachronism to hold the story back for print.
Yeah.
Basically because it just gets ripped off anyway and put up digitally, radio, whatever. It just gets ripped off. So we've given up that long ago. We don't hold anything back for the paper. The only time we do is when we're required to by, say, if we get a what we call a drop. So if we get a story from the government or from another source and they say, well, it's embargoed until 5 a.m., which means you can put it to print and it hits the streets at 5 a.m., but you can't put it up online. And the reason they do that is because they haven't caught up with us. I mean, we're 100% digital, and we basically reverse publish, if you like, back into print. Everything's front loaded into digital. And now the next sort of evolution is into video. So we are breaking our stories now by video.
Well, how do you mean? Like it's more like television?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've got our own wireframe on our app now, which is called DTTV. And, you know, there's a little button on your app. You click on it and there's 33 stories which get refreshed quite frequently. We've got a 5 o'clock bulletin of video and we break news with video. Our reporters are not only writing stories, but they're actually presenting them on video.
But it is competing with television then to some extent.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's competing with appointment media.
Yeah, so the 6 p.m. news.
So we have a bulletin at 5, but we're also breaking news on video throughout the day. But we're not necessarily trying to disrupt them so much as to disrupt ourselves before we get disrupted. If we just stand still, we'll get run over. So we have to keep on evolving our storytelling. And
they are too, by the way. They're using 100%. Digital to keep breaking stories themselves. They're not waiting to the 6 o'clock news.
Oh, yeah. I have
the 9 app, for example, and by the time I get home, and if I get home in time for watch the 6 o'clock news, I've already seen it all.
You have?
Either through you guys, through news.com, or through the 9 News or whatever it is on the app, and I've got 7. I got all of them.
Yeah,
and there are other places, by the way, break news like the Daily Oz.
Yes,
for example, who's been doing it for a long time. That's but they break it in text.
That's right.
Which sort of like for a period there during COVID, I was actually very interested in what they were doing. But I must say, I do prefer to get the video version now.
Oh well, increasingly that's how people need to want to digest it, need to digest it. It doesn't mean we give up on text. It just becomes more multi-layered. What we've discovered is 2 things. Number one, our journos are actually really good on camera. We never expected that. Print journos would actually be pretty good. They're quite articulate. I would say that our print journos have a deeper subject matter knowledge. So that's their comparative advantage over, not disparaging TV journos at all, but a lot of the time they've got, they move from subject to subject and they've essentially got a scripted product that they're presenting, whereas our print journos, they go deep. And so that's what they've got. So my remit to them is to say, listen, just talk to the camera as you're talking to me. If you're briefing me about a story, what's really going on? So, just lift the kimono on whatever this story is. And the second thing is that our readers love it because we're sort of taking them inside a newsroom, and there's still a fascination with that. People still want to know, like you said, your first question off the bat is, what do you do? Like, how does it work? And I still haven't answered that yet, but I will.
I've been waiting for you to answer.
Yeah, I'll get there. But we take them inside the newsroom. And so we've shown our conference. So that's another important element of every day is we sit down with our key leaders, and there's probably about 8 or 10 of us. And we talk through. We've got a what we call a topic plan. We go through those stories. And
how do you mean? Do you sort of say, okay, politics, sport, business? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, all of that.
You've got like
crime,
showbiz.
Yep.
So you've got the categories.
Yep.
They actually properly demarked. In other words, this is category 1.
Yep.
We must cover sport.
Yep.
And then within sport, there are rugby league and AFL and
all of that,
NRLW or whatever.
Yeah.
And do you do that really structured way?
We do. So it is structured. There's a lot of chaos and there's stories coming at you all the time, but you have to have that structure. You have to have a lot of planning. There's a hell of a lot of planning that goes into what we do.
So is your time spent on the planning side of things, or is it more the tactical stuff, sort of saying, shit, there's a new story, we better talk about that?
Both.
So do you see pretty much everything?
Yep.
It goes up on a dashboard or something, does it?
Yeah, we do.
You guys have you'd have a dashboard, or your teams has a dashboard?
Yes.
And
we have data insights dashboard,
Yep.
which is a bit of IP we've got called Verity, and that tells us in real time what all of our readers are reading, how long they're reading it for, what they're reading next. And so that gives us some insights into where the appetite is. It's a tool. It's not the only thing. We've also got to use our own judgment because, our acumen and judgment can sometimes still outstrips the computer, if you like.
Yep.
In some respects.
Yep.
It used to be called the tummy compass.
Yep.
So it's just sort of a combination of both of those things.
Yep.
But increasingly, we're looking to the data tools to help guide us in meeting our consumer needs.
So Verity, is it? Does Verity then also look at everything else that's up on the digital platforms? For example, it might look at something the AFR's writing.
No.
It doesn't.
So we've got that as well. So and everyone's got these things. They've got other tools called Chartbeat, Chartbeast. There's Adobe tools that give you a snapshot of what's happening elsewhere. But that's not as accurate as your internal tools.
But let me ask you this, Ben. So, for example, if somebody else, another one of your competitors, and there's not that many, there's only really one in print, for example, and there's the 9 Group. But do you say, well, that's a good story. We're not talking about it.
Yeah.
Does Ben English go to someone over the? Can you go and chase that story? Do you get to that level of detail, or does your system, your dashboard, actually direct so and so over there go and do it anyway?
No, it's not there yet.
Right. But
AI is coming.
Yeah, but that's more an AI thing.
Yeah.
In other words, this story's got a lot of gravity.
Yeah.
It looks like so many thousand people have read it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it knows that Buzz Phil Rothfield should be writing about it.
Yeah.
Because he's sort of semi-retired Buzz, but whoever is taking his place.
Yeah.
And
Michael Carianis.
Michael, KMC.
Yeah.
Chase it.
Well, it depends.
He probably already knows about it anyway.
Yeah, he does. So sometimes you'll have to make a judgment if the story is big enough. If actually it's a seismic yarn, and you can't ignore it, then you go, okay, we've got to beat him at it. We've got to come up with an angle that takes it forward. You can't just regurgitate what they're doing. If it's a so-so story, we'll ignore it, and because we'll try and make our mark with our own stories, and they do the same. They'll we might come up with some compelling stories, and they'll ignore it because we've already made the ground with it. I think there should be more of us supporting each other.
As opposed to competing with each other.
Yeah. I think in many respects. I think it doesn't do
that's amazing for someone coming out of News Corp to I've never thought I'd hear that. Collaboration, not collaboration, but whatever the word is. because you guys have been so over the years. I mean,
Yeah.
let's face it, Nine versus, let's go right back, Packer versus Murdoch.
Yeah.
That has been an age-long battle.
Generations.
Goes back forever.
Yeah.
And
Down to pitch battles on the Prince sides.
Totally.
Yeah.
Actually, real.
Yeah, totally.
For sure, real. Like real battles are physical.
100%. Legendary.
Legendary. So it's got to, but here you are saying, maybe I don't know who your equivalent is at Nine, but maybe we should perhaps not collaborate, but work together a bit.
Yeah, I'm friends with them when we talk all the time, and you got to think about. You were talking about our only competitor in print is the Herald, but of course, and that's true, right? In Sydney at least, but it's our competitors. They go way beyond that.
It's all the digital
and time
organisations.
Time is a competitor.
It competes with everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
my time.
100%.
Me, the audience.
Yep.
My time.
Yep.
Because not only do you have lots of other people printing the same stories, but you've got it.
But coming back to coming back to collaboration. Yeah. We attack each other too much, right? Diamond's guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. The public doesn't. They just see attacks like basically undermining the media. Yeah. Now we're in the fight of our lives,
and I don't think they care. By the way,
they don't. It's all navel gazing.
They couldn't care less about 9 versus 7, or you. They couldn't care who's done what at 7 or 9. This allegation about the head of news, or I won't say his name, but went on recently.
Yeah, I mean, look, if there's serious workplace issues that are at stake here, I think there's no problem with reporting on that. I guess what I'm talking about is just taking cheap shots at each other.
Yeah,
is not helpful to an industry that's actually in the fight of its life against an onslaught of social media that has no interest in Australian society, has no interest in our welfare, and is just interested in the attention economy. Is rapacious, is actually gouging revenue, not paying back. And, if we want journalism to exist, and I think we all do, I think even people who kind of, resent the media at different times would recognise that the Fourth Estate plays a vital role in, maintaining a functioning community with democracy, with a democracy at its heart. You need a vital and, healthy media sector.
So when you say the Fourth Estate, you're talking about media generally? Media
it's an old-fashioned term for the Fourth Estate. It goes back to the French Revolution.
No, but you're not referring to the big titans.
No,
you're not talking about Facebook or something like that at the moment.
I'm talking more traditional, mainstream media. Yeah, right. Because we are the ones who, we have for a long time taken as part of our mission, serving the public interest, and whatever that may be, and we may be misguided in what we think the public interest is, but at least we pursue that. Whereas I'm not sure I'm certain that that's not the case with those social media giants.
So take me through that then. So, and I quite enamored by the fact that you said serving the public interest, and that's quite a thoughtful comment. Is that mandated to you from above? Does Mclachlan say that? How does it work? Or is it your shareholders? I mean, who says this?
Yeah, I mean, when you say in a sense, it's mandated above in the sense of, the Murdoch ethos, which goes back to Keith Murdoch, Gallipoli, and then what he did in building from the papers in Melbourne, and then Rupert took up the cudgels with the news in Adelaide, and then the extraordinary career he's had, sort of coursing through the ventricles of our company, is a set of values, a set of principles, and that informs us. That's the mandate from above that I would be talking about. Those values would include, but are not limited to, a skepticism of authority. Would
you call it any authority?
I would say, yeah, that's reductive, but yeah, I would say that's right. Yeah, definitely. We're not cozying up to elites.
Yeah.
That's something that Lachlan's grandfather certainly embraced. Certainly, again, going back to the Gallipoli letters, it was about.
Can you take me through the Gallipoli letters?
Well, it was Keith Murdoch who actually lifted the lid on the Gallipoli campaign and reported back to our government, and it certainly wrote some letters that were pivotal in actually challenging the efficacy of that campaign, and basically saying that our kids, our young men were lambs to the slaughter. So
in other words, as they're getting off the various boats and things like landing on the beach.
Yeah, they just said it was an ill-conceived campaign. It was very poorly executed, et cetera, et cetera. And it's quite controversial, but it was historical in the sense that, and I think this is one reason why Gallipoli is so figures so large in the hearts of Australians and also in our sense of nationhood, is that it was the first time we'd fought as a nation under our flag. And it was also, there was that schism. There was that sense of, hang on a minute, like we're serving the empire here, and have we been betrayed? Have we been just led into this slaughterhouse? And so it was the first time there was a sort of a sense of separatism. And Keith Murdoch was pivotal to all that. And it was sort of those values of challenging orthodoxy, challenging those who are in authority or ordained to be in authority, that still is, very much at the forefront of, our value system today.
You said something very interesting. I wouldn't say I'm anti-authority, but I don't like the system just because it's a system. I tend to push against it.
Yeah.
You use the words elite, or you might say elitism. I'm not sure, but the self-appointed elites.
Yeah.
Which it's a big issue in America at the moment. So, and we know what Murdoch position is on that.
Yeah.
And Republicans versus the Democrats, and funny enough, you can go right back to the Civil War. The Democrats they're from the South. They come out of the Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
And the Republicans
they don't talk about that much.
But they should, because it actually was. That's the
they were pro-slavers.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where that whole game originated.
Yeah.
And we'll just move along further because I want to talk about Australia, but your job. But we have something not too dissimilar in Australia. And I do remember the movie Breaking Marine, one of the first great Australian movies, which is about the Boer War, and which is when we got sent in there to do someone else's bidding.
That's right.
Gallipoli's not dissimilar.
Absolutely.
The same deal.
Yeah.
And I'm getting all energized about talking about this because you've hit me right on a spot which is quite tender for me in terms of the elites and who appoint themselves the so-called self-appointed moral dietitians of our society.
Wow. Yeah.
And
that's our sweet spot too.
And they prosecute the shit out of it.
They do.
And they make you feel guilty if you're not part of the movement.
Yeah, and that's that's what we rail against.
That's your sweet spot. I love that.
That's what gives us our purpose.
Yeah.
Is actually exposing the hypocrisy. Because there's always self-interest at the heart of it. It's a lot of, we call them virtue signalers, and there's a lot of what I would call cant. There's a lot of hypocrisy, and
you see more of it.
Oh, it's industrialized.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a production line to me.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's been monetized.
Yeah,
so you see that with various causes. That people can see, wow, there's an opportunity to make a lot of money here.
So would you? I mean, I know I don't know this. I mean, I'm just you're the editor-in-chief at what we all read every day here in New South Wales, Queensland through Courier Mail, and in Victoria through the Herald Sun.
Yeah.
The stories are all shared.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It's just one syndication.
Yeah,
that would be right.
That's right.
Are you interacting? I I don't know if this is right or wrong, on a daily basis with your global chairman? How does that work?
Regularly, not on a daily basis.
So he doesn't say, "Hey, mate, we're just covering the election in the US.
Yeah,
we need much more push, or the Australian election, which is coming up. We need much more push against, let's say, the Labor Party."
No. Interesting. A lot of people ask me that. They wonder about it. There's a sort of, we call it Murdoch derangement syndrome. Does he ring up and say, "Listen, I don't like that brief on page 8." No. Or Lachlan for that matter. But I do speak to Lachlan a lot because he's passionate about news. He's passionate about Sydney and Australia. But I have to say, hand on heart, he's never given me writing instructions on you will have this position. He's more just curious about how we, what our take is on it. I think what they're most passionate about is that we're running the paper well and that the business is being run professionally and that we're actually, in sync with our audience. I think that, and I don't think Rupert was any different. Are we actually serving our audience?
So how do you work out what your audience wants then? I mean, because I've often wondered about this, is that is the media forging and moulding public opinion and serving it to the public? Or is the public making those decisions and requiring you to deliver what decision they've made?
Yeah, great question. I think it's both. I think the way that we best influence sentiment, opinion, is by breaking stories, like by exposing things and which otherwise wouldn't be known. That is what shapes opinion. And then of course the emphasis we give on different stories, that also shapes opinion too. So the front page. I know that people, talk about the decline of print, but the front page still is an incredibly powerful instrument.
Is it as powerful on the digital version? So, for example, when I get I subscribe to the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah,
I actually don't look at the front page.
No,
I mean I see what you say. You go some stories from the top stories, or something, and it's signed by Ben.
Newsletter. Yeah,
and I get that each day.
Yeah,
and then I get two emails.
Yeah.
One's from you.
Yeah.
Not to me. I mean, you send to everybody, but it's sort of same with the stories after day. And then there's another one, which is the actual newspaper.
Sure.
But the front page is not that important to me anymore.
Yeah.
Digitally, I'm talking about.
Yeah, digitally. It's interesting. COVID was a bit of a game changer in terms of how people interact with the paper, right? So a lot more people started reading the paper, so as it's printed, online. So we call it a digital print edition. And, on your app, down the bottom, it says today's paper. You click on it, up comes the paper as it was printed.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do that.
But I don't find it that compelling, the front page is what I'm saying.
It's not as compelling.
Yeah.
No, because there's something about the tactile paper, right? Yeah. It's big for a start. Yeah. It's a lot bigger than you can get it on your phone or your iPad.
Yeah, I use the phone, yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't have the same impact. But we're still making money from the printed product.
Wow.
Good money on it, right? So
is that more cost control and as opposed to a lot of cost revenue?
Control?
Yeah.
But also, there's still healthy advertising in print, and it's still making a profit.
Well, Katie Page has been very generous to you guys.
She's a great.
Katie, are you listening?
She's a great person, passionate about print. Obviously, it works for her. Yeah. So thank you, Katie.
It sure does.
Yeah. And so look, obviously, and this is no secret, print, circulation is in a steady decline. It has been for 30 years actually. But it's still, we still sell a lot of papers. The trick, of course, and this is what everyone's trying to do around the globe, is as that's declining, you ramp up your digital engagement and consumption so that when print runs out, you're still firing.
Do you think there'll be a day? Because I remember when Amazon came along and every bookstore in the world closed down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, mysteriously, bookstores started opening up. In fact, Amazon opened up a bookstore.
Yeah, it's so true.
Do you think there will come a day where we'll have no newspaper, physical?
Yeah.
Or do you think that I don't want to call it a romance, but whatever it is, the tactile nature of having a newspaper will sort of hit a level where it won't go below. Maybe it won't grow, but
just
it won't.
A base level.
Yeah, baseline.
Yeah, look, the brutal economics will tell you that probably there's no papers in 20 years.
Because there's no point having that baseline because the cost of running the baseline
you
says we're not going to do it anymore.
100%. You've got all these fixed costs that you literally can't justify unless you say, well, it's a vanity product that we do for
brand or something.
Marketing purposes. But I think that when you get to that point, you're going to, by all means, you can create it, the DPE, but you don't have to actually send it to the print site.
Yeah.
I think it'll be after I'm long gone. I think the papers are here for quite some time yet. I think, eventually it'll get to, 3 a week, 2 a week, 1 a week, but that's a way off.
Do you know? I mean, I guess you do know this, but do you have an analytical sense?
Yeah.
Or your business does it have an analytical sense of the age and or generations actually physically still buy the paper? I know a lot of people still buy it at a newsagent, and I feel sorry for poor old newsagents, but they don't collect the data for you. I mean, you would know in terms of what gets done.
We've got a pretty good idea.
Yeah. And how do you work that out? Well, not how do you work it out, but what are you finding out? Are you finding out as people over 60 or what are we looking at?
Yeah, it's over 65.
Yeah.
I think the average age of our print readers is about 68.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spiron's my age.
Yeah, but look, you've got the project to keep them alive, right? Project 100? Or?
Yeah, I want them to go to 108.
Well, we need to support you in that.
No, I'd like you to support me in that because we actually together have the same interest.
We do, the same demographic.
Totally. But what I'm really interested to know too, by the way, is because Project 100 is not just about old people living to a long age. It's about younger people become much more aware of it.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that's really important to us is younger people understanding how much money they need to earn to live to 100.
Yeah.
Not, because, the current modelling I'm about to organise a actuary to do this analysis for me. But the current modelling, as I understand the model and the inputs to the model, is that there's an assumption that someone's going to retire at 65 years of age on an average income, has for the last 35 years or since compulsory superannuation got introduced by Keating in the mid-90s, has been putting away in variable amounts, but between 9, now 12% of their wages into, the employer's been doing this into a super fund. The super funds, there's an assumption that they're earning 8% per annum or whatever, some other number. And the assumption is that you die at 81.
Yeah.
And the output is that how much money do I have to have between 65 and 81 to have nothing at the day I die?
Yeah.
Or enough to pay my funeral?
Yeah.
And that money's coming out of what I put away on the assumption that it earns so much over that 30-odd year period. And, of course, if all of a sudden we now live to 100, anyone who's lives beyond 81 is not going to have any money.
Yeah.
And I'm really passionate about that.
Yeah.
And that's a big education program.
It's enormous.
So what does, say, someone like your organisation become passionate about in terms of education programs for your readers? What are you trying to educate them about? Are you trying to educate them about democracy, how important democracy still is, or are you trying to educate them about how important challenging the elites is?
I think it's about certainly those things, but it's also about enabling them to live their lives to the best of their ability. So it's informing them.
So it's gone beyond where you used to be.
Yeah, very much.
How can you live? Ben English is saying, for example, to me, a consumer, Mark, we'll give you stories.
Absolutely.
That'll help you live longer and live better and perhaps have a better life with your family. And these are the things you need to know.
So it's such a great question, and it's something we've been grappling with for some time, is that how do we justify someone to subscribe to our product? And it's not enough just to tell them what happened.
Because you can get that anywhere.
It's commoditized.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got to start increasingly tell them why, how, and what's next.
Well, you used to do that on the Sunday Telegraph, Ben. You used to have Mad Dog.
Yes.
He used to have his section,
Yeah, the health.
Yeah, the health thing.
We've got the Barefoot Investor.
Yeah, you got him as well.
Yeah.
Scott.
Scott Pape.
Scott Pape.
Yeah. So that's true. That's true, right? So the papers have always served that. They've always had that breadth. But we've got to reflect that in our digital products as well. And that's why I love your Project 100. I think it's a fabulous concept.
It's a step beyond what those guys are doing.
By the way, I'm not paid to say that.
No, I understand.
Genuinely think it's good.
But it is a step beyond that. And we're working on getting a producer and all that sort of stuff. But
yeah.
Are you seeing that's a pretty altruistic position for you guys to take?
But it's not out of, there's a selfishness to it. And the selfishness is that unless we do that, then people are not going to subscribe.
So in other words, it's becoming nearly compulsory.
Oh, absolutely. People are so demanding. And they're promiscuous when it comes to how they digest.
They jump from one to the other.
100%. So we've got to give them a reason to come back to us frequently.
Be sticky, as they call it.
So we've got to do much better with, health, wealth,
are they
education.
Emerging, Ben? Are they really emerging?
They are. Yeah, people are wanting this. They want what we call breadth of subject matter. Like I said, everyone knows us to be fantastic in our coverage of NRL politics, showbiz, and particularly crime. But we absolutely need to offer a lot more than that. Our consumers these days are people who are actually subscribing to us. They're sophisticated, they're informed, and they demand, rightly, more information, more insights.
In terms of the education piece, which who would think of a newspaper as becoming educational or an educator? And I don't mean it in a condescending way for newspapers are telling people.
Sure.
But it's more about because there are a lot of people who are not sophisticated.
Yeah.
And traditionally, a lot of those people bought the telly.
Yeah.
And they just want to know about the local robbery or whatever it was and the footy.
Well, that's changed.
And I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I think if you go back 20, 30 years, where you could go for information was so much more limited. It's what I call linear. It's basically what you were saying. There's a very few owners of the information and they fed it down to the market. And now it's been completely flattened. It's been atomized. And so how do we justify our continuing existence? We're no longer, or we're less so much of a mass market daily. It's more we're actually, increasingly serving a not niche, but a dedicated readership. And as those readership levels have declined, the level of, sophistication and education has gone up. So those people who might have been buying the paper, when we were selling 600,000 copies, 40 years ago, they're getting all the information on Facebook or Insta. A lot of those people who no longer buy the paper. The people who are buying the paper or are subscribing to the paper, they're actually very well informed and very well engaged, leaning into the debates.
And then, so does that mean crime? Crime sells in terms
of... It does, still does.
Does that mean crime, though, starts to take, in terms of what you guys produce, starts to take less of a frontline position? Yeah,
look, we still want to be the best at it, and we have the best. But I think we've got to, it's got to be part of a broader offering, So that's where we're leaning in towards. We won't ever drop crime because, you're right. People, rightly or wrongly, they love reading about it.
Well, I know it's not one of the most watched podcasts. Whenever I have a crime guest on my show, it pumps.
People love it.
They love it. Crime, sex, and sport generally, but crime and sex kill it.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. Why do you think? Do you think that health, longevity, blah blah blah?
Yeah.
Just a better life.
Yeah.
Because you guys have been writing about this for a long time. But it hasn't emerged above crime. It hasn't emerged above sport.
Yeah.
It hasn't emerged above politics. But do you think as a nation, we age and we become more wealthy? Because, by the way, anyone who owns property in this country is over 50 is now wealthy.
Yeah.
And they're looking for how can I hang out longer?
Yeah.
Do you think those aspects that you guys have been playing with and covering but haven't promoted will emerge up there, at least equivalent?
Look, they're not as explosive, obviously, literally they're not, but I do believe people will subscribe for that subject. If the information is compelling enough, if it's engaging, it's interesting, we tell stories as imaginatively as we do in other, as we tell our crime stories, then I think it will engage.
I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think that is too.
Because your crime stories are good headlines.
Yeah.
You've got really good journalists.
Yeah.
You've got your good journalists writing it.
Yeah.
And it's captivating, especially if you put some imagery up about it. But like if
it's like anything, right? It's like anything, Mark. You've got to humanise it, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, TikTok's sort of saying, it's all about peer-to-peer. Well, it's always been about peer-to-peer. It's always been like going back, we started in 1879. The best stories were always the ones which you could put a face to. What's the illustration? How are we, what's the picture? Where's the picture? We're visual creatures. Not just visual, but we also want to hear the story personally. So if you told a bland story about, hey, if you take this cod liver concoction, then, statistics say you're going to live this, who cares, right? But if you've got someone who said, hey, I was on death's door and I started taking this and now I'm actually doing 50 press-ups a day, probably read that.
And especially if it was in a video.
Yeah, video even better.
Yeah, and it was someone who was known. Because I was prior to you coming in, I did a podcast with a chap and he's got this unbelievable new app and he's very successful doing these things as a technologist. But he was talking to me about dementia. And for people over 60 years of age, and that's a big part of Australia, and I dare say probably a lot of your subscribers are over 60, the most searched illness on through all the search engines is dementia.
Yeah, right.
People are terrified of it. Yeah. They are actually terrified of it.
Well, going back to what you were saying, right, I don't think many people actually anticipate they're going to die at 81 now. So chances are you're going to have some form of Alzheimer's or dementia if you're going to live longer. So there's anxiety around, am I going to have enough dough?
Yeah.
There's anxiety around, am I going to have my family around me, my friends?
Who's going to be white mask?
Correct.
One of my kids?
It's pretty much it.
And you say to your kids,
be nice to them.
Yeah, well, they might all say no. I got 4 sons. They might all say no. Dad stuffed that.
Yeah.
But they're important questions, I think, for us. But I want to ask you this question. You were a journalist originally.
Yeah. I still consider myself one.
Well, yeah. But you're more, like sitting at the top of the tree, sort of making more decisions in relation to the strategy around the business, and then probably looking oversight on tactics.
Sure.
But do you still have a hankering to be a journalist? Like actually want to write a story?
Yeah.
Have you written any recently?
I did an interview with James Packer, which was a thrill.
Yep.
I
read it.
Did you? Okay,
yeah.
Good. Yeah, I mean, look, I did it as a Q&A, which I think, I really enjoyed it. I thought he was fascinating.
Did you have to go over to see him?
I didn't, no. We just did it, basically online.
Yep.
And, it was tremendous and he was so candid.
Yeah.
I thought the feedback's been
incredibly candid.
Incredibly. Yeah. Good on him.
I felt like James was purging a little bit. Like
it did feel that
getting it off his chest.
Yeah, I thought it was cathartic in some way.
Yeah, very
perhaps,
cathartic.
And it was really. I was really heartened by. He seems in a much better place now. But anyway, I digress. So it's got the blood pumping a bit. But there's a thrill in actually editing a paper and editing the sites. And that's like there's a bigger canvas there and actually coming up with ideas and then getting them executed is sort of a different sort of thrill. But
so how does it work? Does a journalist put the story up in in the old days someone would have gone and corrected the
there's
grammar.
all of that. Yeah, there's all of that.
But you don't do that.
I don't do that, but it's more like I said, we come back to in the morning we all get together and the chief of staffs come in and they'll have this topic plan and they'll go through what they're pitching. They'll pitch, right? And there's probably 50 stories they'll talk about. And the other leaders will say, well, hang on a minute, what about this? Have
Is
we
it a
thought
physical
about
meeting?
that?
Physical meeting?
Physical meeting.
Like you're all sitting in a room?
Yeah, we're all in a –
right.
It's very old-fashioned.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And that's where, particularly the morning one, there's a morning one, there's an afternoon one. And in fact, there's meetings well before that. Like they start at 6. People start getting in at 5. They have their first sort of meeting, talking about content, probably about 7. By the time we have our main conference, it's 10, but everything's been up and running for a long time. And that first conference is where you have that really full and frank exchange of ideas, where you throw stuff around and people will pipe up and say, oh, I don't think that's crap. You say, what about this? And, and...
Is it consensus type or is it you?
A bit of both. Look, they someone's talking about it as a benevolent, sometimes not so benevolent dictatorship, but I certainly try to cultivate a lot of voices in that room, try and get everyone, because that's how people get motivated. If they're relevant and they're part of the process. Yeah, and heard. Yeah. And once you get that going, it's fantastic, and then people are fired up. The best newsrooms are the ones where people are just leaning into stuff and excited and chasing something that they think's a really good thing to go after.
And do you? And I guess the reward is getting a story up.
Absolutely.
For them to get their story up.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different things. Like there's chasing a scoundrel, and you're trying to get their image. There's a minister gone sour, and so you're chasing the political story around that, or there's a scandal involving a cover up or whatever. There's so many different flavors to it. I mean, there's like last week we did the Bush Summit in Orange. And unbelievable luck, as far as we're concerned, is that literally 4 days before the summit, the federal environment minister cans a $1 billion gold mine just up the road from where we were holding the summit. And so that was just a gift, because then we could just absolutely...
This is the gold mine.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the secret business that wasn't disclosed.
Song lines, yeah. And so we, inside the business, well, let's have a lot of fun with that, And what that means is let's just go for it and find every angle, and and the way you have fun with it is by exposing details, is going after it and digging into the story about, well, what was the process? Who did the minister speak to or didn't speak to? What about the mine operator? Did they engage with the local Aboriginal community? And it's in digging up those facts that the fun is had, because you expose the gaps.
Does Ben English say to the journalist or the journalists, okay, you go and find out, whether the Labor Party above the particular minister is in agreement with this outcome, both at state and federal? Do you allocate sort of jobs, or do they know this stuff?
That. Sometimes I'll just say, what about, one of my reporters, I might say, what's O'Doherty doing? Could he do that? But it's more me. It's the chief of staffs. They're in charge of the staff.
Right.
I leave that to them. I won't prescribe that, because otherwise I'll screw it up, because they've got enough. They're juggling a lot of balls.
Yep.
They'll know who they can allocate to it.
Yep.
But what the most important thing each day is prioritising. You need to know what you're going after. And that's maximum 2 or 3 stories that you really go after and you throw your resources into. There's an old saying that, if you've got the front page sewn up, then everything else takes care of itself. It's not quite like that, but it's pretty close. If you get that main story right, then the rest of the paper sort of, it usually is a good paper.
How do you know how long to go after something? I mean, when something sort of run out of legs?
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm still obsessed with it, and people's like, "Hey,
it's over.
The war's over."
Yeah,
I'm like that Japanese soldier on the island in the 1950s.
Yeah.
But so that's why you have a good sort of council of minds around you, saying, sort of pulling you up.
And do you're in terms of your teamwork, because I guess that's what you're referring to. Do you tend to have people around you in that regard, like let's call it your in-house counsel? I don't mean lawyers, but counsellors, counsellors, or whatever the word is. Do you rely on people that you've always known, that you've worked with in the past for a long time, you trust, they trust?
Yeah, I mean, there's a small group of guys and girls in our office who are brilliant. I'm extremely blessed. A lot of people say this about their teams, but I've just genuinely got a great team around me, and I heavily rely on them. There's only about 5 or 6 of them who, you bring in, and you often will have what we call a crisis meeting. We sort of, we love to call it a crisis meeting, and sometimes it's 6 p.m. We go, okay, what are we doing here? This is still a mess, and you work through it. And you work through that on longer term projects. You work through it on something you got to turn around in the next half hour.
Where do you see, and I don't mean in terms of hard copies of newspapers versus digital newspapers. But where do you see news organisations like yours, like massive ones, in 10 years' time? Do you see? I'm hopefully they will be listening, but staff don't get nervous about this. I'm not saying replacing staff, but AI will have a big part of all this.
Yeah, it will
play a big, and particularly the editorial stage, at the stories we want to chase.
Yeah,
there'll be some sort of, you might even have it be some sort of software.
Yeah.
That'll be looking at what's going on in the world, saying this is what everyone's talking about, this is what readers want to know about, blah blah blah, and it will determine what the editorial bent will be for the day or the week or the month.
Yeah, I mean, look,
where do you see it?
It's gonna be massive. But I'm more glass half full.
Yep.
I see it as liberating our finest minds, our best journos, to actually do what they do best, which is, uncover and expose and bring home stories that matter. A lot of the time, there's an incredible amount of unglamorous activity involved in actually putting a paper out and actually pulling a story together. A lot of calls that are not answered, a lot of emails that are ignored, and a lot of doors that are knocked on that go unanswered as well. AI won't replace that, but AI will go a long way to helping that process.
More an enhancement.
Absolutely, it's going to be a tool that, in ways that we haven't imagined yet, but the ways that I already know about, is going to be a fantastic aid to us. It can wade through. You might have a Hansard, say, for example, or in Parliament,
or the Parliament record inquiries
that committees have done, and you can basically far more efficiently wade through that. Council meetings, which we don't have enough reporters to go to the council meetings. Now, there's no replacement for actually physically being there, but certainly AI can help with that. It can also help. I'll give you an example as well. ChatGPT, right? So we just did it as an experiment. We said, okay, we want to send a cadet to, and we imagine that there's been a drowning on the Central Coast. And we said, okay, ChatGPT, here are the facts. A boy 12 has drowned at Yamina Beach at 10 a.m. His body was found face down in the surf. Ask 5 questions. And so ChatGPT came up with questions like, what was his name? Okay, that's fine. Ask us another 5 questions. ChatGPT says, well, was there anyone else on the beach? Were there any surf lifesavers there? Ask another 5 questions. And by the time we got to the 20th, and by the way, it's taken about 3 minutes, it's asking questions that we didn't anticipate. So that's story gathering, right? That's a story gathering tool that could be really useful for young reporters to hone their craft about asking the right questions at a press conference. As an example, there's so many things that it can do that are going to help us. Yes, it's a threat too, but there's going to be some help along the way. And
do you think that there's going to be? I mean, for me, for example, it's a survey one, but that's all I have. It's the only tool I have. I should ask ChatGPT, but because I have the ability to consume so often and so fast local news. Yeah. So let's take the Bondi Junction Westfield drama.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. And pretty much everyone had the same information at that stage. And so I felt as though I'd seen it all and read it all. I did sort of give myself a bit of an uppercut because that night I won't say I lost interest in it, but my interest had been completely filled. My cup was filled.
Yeah.
I couldn't get any more information.
Sure.
So I started watching global news. Now, I don't know whether I'm an unusual survey, but I became more interested in what was happening in the US and then and a little bit to the and to the UK.
Yeah.
Which are my sort of 2 important areas that I like to know about.
Yeah.
In terms of news. Do you think that news will become more local and less local and more global over time? Are consumers becoming more interested in what's going on around in the world? Is there far more weight attached to that than there has been in the past, or do you think people just really want to know what's going on locally?
I think it's the latter. I think you're a really well-educated person. You're you've travelled the world, you're a worldly person. I'm not saying most people aren't like that, but my experience is that hyper-local is where people are at. They want to know what's happening in their world.
Right. It
doesn't mean they don't also want to know about what's happening in the States, but there's no point me focusing resources on that because I'll never do it as well as anyone else. What I do have a comparative advantage in is hyperlocal and owning this town.
So talking about it globally, let's talk about him. Donald Trump, former president, or I think they still call him, once you're president, you're always president. President Trump. The next election. So no doubt, you're going to be covering, you guys are covering it all.
Yeah.
Is Kamala going to beat Donald? What do you think of that? Do you think that was an unbelievably cute move?
Oh, it was incredible.
In terms of timing?
It was incredible. I think that interesting your thoughts, but I thought the Democrats timed that debate to give them options.
Yeah.
I think what the Democrats have done to reimagine her is unbelievable. It's incredible.
Her social media is
incredible.
It's got nothing, but it's ridiculously good.
It's the Seinfeld candidate, right?
Yeah, totally.
She's a candidate about nothing, but it's the vibe.
And it's the dancing, the look.
But everything. It's amazing how suddenly Trump's the old guy.
Yeah. And he looks at
yeah. And he hasn't worked it out yet.
Do you think?
Yeah, he hasn't worked out what the narrative is. And it's not working for him to attack her personally yet.
No.
I think if he sticks to policies, then he's every chance. I haven't answered your question, whether she'll win.
What do you reckon? The polls got her ahead at the moment, slightly.
They do.
Is it a popularity contest though? Is America moved away from policy to popularity? Because we're talking about voting for a president. We're not trying to talk about voting for a party versus another party. It's now
okay. This is where I think that if Trump successfully positions her as part of the current administration and he sticks to policies, he just talks about immigration, cost of living, and getting America moving again, and then he wins. I'm not sure if he can. I'm not sure if he's capable of it. And I think the other problem is that people look at him and they go, maybe we want to move on from all the rancor. And maybe this is our chance to break from that. Whether rightly or wrongly, maybe he's associated with that. But if you had a gun to my head, I say Trump wins. I think he just gets over the line. I think he gets Georgia. I think he wins. He still wins Arizona and Nevada and maybe one of the Rust states, maybe Pennsylvania, and he gets there.
Does it make a difference?
That's a great question. I think it's often overstated what difference it makes. I really do. People talk about Trump like, oh my God, if Trump comes in, it's just going to be Armageddon. Well, kind of wasn't when he was president. In fact, on a foreign policy front, it was actually very sound. He didn't have any wars.
No. He was actually you're right. He was quite sound and quite reasonable.
Very reasonable. He's a very good businessman, and he kind of ran it that way. And America was pumping before COVID came along. So I agree with you. I think it's a great question. I think that we definitely overestimate the importance of whoever the incumbent is. Look, America's basically been running with someone. They've been running in a vacuum for the last 2 years. Biden has not been firing on all cylinders.
Nor is she.
And nor is she. You only have to go back through the transcript about how muddled she is on so many issues. But I must say she's been pretty good in the spotlight the last 4 weeks. Incredible, actually.
Well, you guys, your organisation, you sort of dig deep into the weeds, and you must be getting sort of lots of information from the US.
Yeah.
This looks like to me. It looks like to me. I've got no idea, but it looks like to me it's all been coordinated below. Like it looks like there's a puppet master or puppet masters.
It does look that way. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
but it does.
It looks scripted, right?
It totally looks scripted.
Well, certainly because
I know, and I'm talking conspiracy either. I'm just saying, this is power brokers managing a process, And doing a brilliant job at it.
Doing a brilliant job at it, and aided and abetted by the vast majority of mainstream media.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget, the Hunter Biden laptop was buried. It was buried by Google. It was buried by Zuckerberg. It was buried by Twitter before Musk took it, and it was buried by all the mainstream networks. The only ones that were running it were the Post, Wall Street Journal, and Fox. And so most of America did not even know about it, and yet it was a scandal. It was a dreadful scandal. So that plays a big. Just to your point about it all being neatly scripted, they're all dancing to that card.
Are we talking about like no, I don't want to get really weird, but is it like a cabal of powerful people?
I don't know if it is.
Yeah, but like I
don't think they get together in a room, right?
It's not coordinated.
But there's almost like an implicit...
There's market signalling.
Yeah, market signalling.
There's signalling.
100%.
And I get it. You guys are saying that. So this is how we're going to contribute.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Facebook and I'm going to say, I'm going to bury this.
Yeah.
And then...
There would have been phone calls.
Yeah,
definitely.
For sure.
Mates, mate, this is rubbish. You're not going to run that, are you? No, don't worry. Buried.
Yeah.
So it would have been more kind of at that level. As I say, it wouldn't have been an executive meeting saying, this is our policy. But you also have, within these organisations, everyone's signed up, right? So you're sort of pushing through an open door. Everyone's all part of that mission.
Because, during COVID, Zuckerberg's already admitted that he buried certain stuff about COVID.
It's dangerous.
Totally dangerous.
I mean, people would say, I'm a Murdoch editor.
Yeah.
Well, what are you talking about? Don't you guys do that?
Whether you do or you don't, doesn't matter. But maybe they're both dangerous. But at least it's good to know that there's two sides of there's some balance in the system.
100%. And
I guess that people's prejudices and their and also their biases.
Yeah.
We're humans. It always comes out.
Yeah, it does.
If you have the ability to write it, because even like if I look at the way someone writes a story, generally speaking, I can see the language that they use is going to reflect their bias and or their prejudice. It
is, and rightly so. There have been concerns in the past about concentration of media, but we've never seen anything like this in human history, where a search engine is so utterly dominant on how we get our information.
Yeah,
and so it's unprecedented and terrifying in a sense that whatever you type in. You can't. It's been controlled.
So you must have breathed a sigh of relief when Musk took over X or took over Twitter, because he sort of brought some. Well, he brought another side of the story.
Yeah, look, he's a grenade thrower.
Yep.
We need them in the world, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be a bit messy.
Rightly or wrongly, we do need it.
Well, I think that's where Trump is sort of in that mold too, right? So. When people say they don't like Trump, it's mainly because when you actually push them on it, it's often quite slippery. They can't actually say what it is they hate about him. Yeah. I think it's because he's obnoxious. Yeah. I think it's because he kind of goes against the grain of what people expect a politician should look and feel like.
And sound like.
Right? And so he's that ultimate disruptor in that way. And, there's a lot that's objectionable about that. But also I think none of us should be surprised that he came along, because we were basically served up crap for so long that there was a vacuum there waiting to be filled.
I see him as the ultimate disruptor because he disrupted politics.
Yeah.
Without any right to do so.
Yeah.
But he saw the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I have met him a couple of times, and on the occasions that I interviewed him once. The only interview he did in Australia, he gave me a half-hour interview. It was during the TV series, and he of course owns The Apprentice. He's one of the owners of The Apprentice, and so he offered to do it. He offered me that I could do it, and we could get footage for our show. But the thing that I took away from was this pre-president. He has to be, for me, the penultimate. Or the ultimate marketing person when you go to market your own brand.
Genius.
Ever in history.
Well, that's a lot coming from you.
There's a lot of people who are up there, but but in modern history at least, obviously there's some ancient, JC was pretty good at it, but he still lasted till today. But Trump in modern history has to be one of the most ultimate, I think, self-promoters. And I don't mean that as a narcissist in a narcissistic way. I just mean putting himself in a position to disrupt politics as it was always seen.
Yeah, he has a genius.
There is a genius there.
There is a genius about
even in the way he speaks.
Yeah.
And because I can tell you, the language we hear on television is not how he speaks one-on-one.
Really?
No. He doesn't talk that way.
So it's deliberate.
It's deliberate.
Wow.
It's well crafted.
Yeah.
Like whether it's others have crafted for him, I don't know, but it's well crafted. The language.
It's instinctive though, isn't it?
He does it. He does it. It's a performance.
Yeah, it is.
It's like it's showmanship
he
at its
entertains
best.
you. He's incredibly entertaining.
Even if you hate him, you're still entertained.
You're still mesmerised.
Because you want to watch him to hate him. You want to watch him to criticize him for somebody else.
Well, it's no accident that the New York Times, the Washington Post, those left-leaning mastheads of the states, had their greatest subscription growth after Trump won. It was the best thing that ever happened to them. Because they had something to rail against and people rallied to them to say, well, why should we hate Trump? And they articulated it for them.
Do you think that I know we don't have presidential elections in Australia, but do you think that we are starting to move a little bit towards that territory and it's nearly becoming, our polls do this, but prime ministerial elections, I know we vote for our local member, but we are starting to move that territory.
I think we are. And you see that this week where Jim Chalmers has attacked Dutton.
Yeah.
Attacked the man. Policy, it's harder to actually win the argument on policy these days. The soundbite is getting compressed, and so they go after the guy. Which I think, by the way, is a sign of insecurity.
It's not very Australian either, by the way.
No,
and I'm not sure
like
if it works. We play the ball, we don't play the man.
Yeah, Aussies don't like it. No,
that's what I think too.
Yeah.
But my gut feeling is politics is borrowing from what they see in America.
No, definitely.
And it's nearly like particularly when it comes to Labor and the Democrats, Labor and Australian Democrats, US. I think that it feels like to me that they're nearly talking to each other and saying, listen, we've got an election coming up too. Yeah. Is there something you can help us as your, compatriots in the same cause?
Yeah.
Win our next election or hold our position in Australia because it's important for you as a Democrat, as a Democrat leadership, for Australia to be similar with the Labor Party. And I just that's just the thing I feel. I don't know if it's
certainly in terms of political strategy, there's a heap of exchange of ideas.
Oh, there is?
There's actually individuals who've worked on both campaigns.
Wow.
It happened with Keir Starmer. It happened also on the Conservative side where Crosby Textor, they helped out with the Conservative campaigns in the UK. There's actually a Labor guy from Australia who's working on the Democrats campaign. So there's definitely
and we'll come back too probably to work on
totally. There's cross pollination there happening.
That's the real deal.
Definitely,
because I suspected some. I just feel it because of the way, like they're polling every week.
Oh yeah,
and
and the small. So at the moment, this is actually written about at the weekend. I'm not making this up. That they were saying that the small target strategy that Kamala has adopted may in some way have been borrowed. I mean, maybe it's overstating it, but they're suggesting that does emulate in a way the way Albanese had a successful campaign in that he kind of was able to successfully present himself as a no damage alternative that I've got a safe pair of hands here. There was not much policy, not huge policy discussion during that campaign. It was mainly just I'm not Morrison.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that because I've been thinking about the upcoming election. By the way, I have a prediction, so I'll boldly say it to you.
Great.
I think, I've said this because I still do lots of talks and lectures on the economy, and I said recently, if Labor calls an election before the end of this year, you can pretty much bet that come February next year we're going to have a recession. Because they know the numbers better than anybody else because, they're talking to Treasury all the time.
Right.
And Labor will call that election because they don't want to go into election mode
In a recession.
In a recession, because that's just good night.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily follow if they don't call election before the end of this year that we won't have a recession next year, because there could be other administrative
things.
But it
means
getting
that
in
there
the
definitely will be one if they're going to
100%.
Right.
And we are seeing a little bit of noise at the moment, and a little bit of ball passing and like pushing the blame across the RBA. I'm getting signs right now, and because and by the way, what I think is quite interesting is that the RBA was appointed.
Yeah.
By this party, and in fact by the Treasurer.
Yep.
Yet now he's coming home on the RBA. The RBA more recently, very sort of interestingly, but sort of pointed to the fact that they're working against the government at the moment, or the government's working against them.
That's right.
They didn't say as much, but that
sort of
can be inferred.
There's a coded war going on. Yeah.
And I find it quite interesting, and I just my gut feeling is. Something is brewing at the Labor level. I think they're getting nervous.
So on that, can I just turn it back to you? Yeah. Do you think, I mean, we're talking about this narrow path that Bullock has to sort of try and navigate, right? And
I don't think there is a narrow path. It's binary. It's one or the other.
Right.
It's either recession or no recession. And I think it's got to be recession.
Okay. So therefore her bias should be towards cutting rates, right?
Yeah, no, therefore she should say, their database, so they're going to say, yes, the bias will be, but she's never going to say it.
No.
So she's going to hold rates.
Because she doesn't want to have inflationary expectations,
No,
right?
no, she doesn't want to do what her predecessor did.
Yes.
So she's not going to say anything. So she just hold rates.
I think she's been very good, by the way.
I do too.
Yeah.
She'd be measured.
Yes. Yeah.
And by the way, she hasn't got upset with the government because the government is actually spending money at state and federal levels, not just one, but at both levels, which is actually making her job a lot harder.
It is.
Because the money's not being spent so much in infrastructure, but it's all the employees that the government's employing.
Yeah.
In all the various great outcomes, NDIS, they're all things that need to be done. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But maybe a little hold on, like a freeze on employment for maybe 6 months would be a good idea, because every single person of the 36,000 people they announced are going to be employed in the last budget at a federal level, they're all going to be put into one of these pockets.
That's right.
And they're all going to get paid a lot of money, and they are getting paid a lot of money, and they're generally speaking are being pulled out of organisations like mine and the CBA and everyone else.
There's capacity constraints in the private sector.
Correct. Right? And we have to pay more money than to get a person.
That's right.
So my only alternative then is to increase my pricing.
Yeah.
Which we can't in our industry, because we have a standard price that pretty much everyone charges. But other industries can charge, and that by definition is going to be inflationary. So there seems to me, to answer your question, from the governor of the Reserve Bank's position, I think she knows. And, we only have to go back to the great Paul Keating, who, people don't like him. He is very divisive, but you have to say he's probably one of the smarter treasurers we've ever had.
Yep.
And he did some great things, at the time. Keating brought in compulsory superannuation, which has turned out to be a great relief against the Australian purse when people retire, given we've got an ageing population. I would dare say that order needs to be recalculated, but it doesn't matter. Sure. He did deregulate the banking system, so allow people like my business to come out and to put pressure on the banks to lend at the right price. He did a lot of stuff.
Floated the currency.
Yeah. He did a lot of great things. But he also did something really important in 1991, I think he was treasurer at the time. He said, this is the recession we had to have.
Yeah.
And if you look at the stats right now, and she'd be looking at the stats all the time, we have never had as bad statistics in a data sense in terms of GDP, et cetera, retail sales, et cetera, as we had back in 1991. We have to go back 30 years to see the same numbers. And I could only say to you, because he was already always honest, Paul, which is why he lost his election in 96, because he's probably too honest for us. But he did say we had to have that recession to curb inflation. And my gut feeling is she's probably saying the same, but won't say it. And I think the Treasurer probably knows it.
Yeah.
And I think that Treasury numbers, we're going to get some numbers out in the next couple of days, but he probably is terrified of those things, and he's going to start pushing the blame down the other end of the bookshelf.
Well, look, Albanese quite rightly said before the last election that because he was asked, well, how are you going to drive real increase in wages without unleashing inflation? He said, because we're going to get productivity gains. So he hasn't delivered on that. And I think that's the most...
He's delivered on the first part, but he delivered on productivity.
Delivered on the first part. But the most critical thing in my mind is the second part.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get productivity gains, but you certainly don't get productivity gains by making the industrial system more rigid. And I think that's where it's going to come home to roost for them, is that they've introduced some draconian restrictions on businesses. And the latest one being the right to disconnect, which are just ideological in nature and absolutely anathema to productivity
and small business growth.
Well, small business is that's where it's really the rubber's hitting the road, right? I mean, you'd be seeing that, would you not?
I totally see it. Like 70% of every person that's employed in this country, gainfully employed in this country, works for a small business. Most small businesses work on the premise that they don't have premises, so people actually work from home. Because rent's so high, commercial rent's so high, and it makes sense for people to work from home because a lot of these things are administrative roles. Yep. Well, productivity means if you're working for me and you work from home, that it probably means that you're going to stop at 3 o'clock because you might want to pick your kids up, which is fine, but you want to pick up tools again at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I know the banks operate this way. I mean, most of the banks who talk to my brokers talk to them at 7 p.m. at night.
Yeah.
The credit people ring my guys up, my brokers at 7 p.m. at night. And
it's flexible, right?
Correct. So if all of a sudden I can't ring my guys after 5 o'clock, then how am I going to get my loans approved?
Yeah.
So, and by all small businesses are affected like this. They all have flexibility. They have to have flexibility because if they don't provide the flexibility to their staff members, the staff members have so many choices where they can go and work. Work for the government or never go to work.
We had a front page story today about how hopeless our councils are at approving development applications. If you had them if the councils were the private sector, they wouldn't be knocking off at 3 o'clock and having an RDO every 9 days. And those applications will probably be getting done more frequently. There's an example of where the state is the dead hand on productivity.
And that's why the federal government will never they will never build 1.2 million houses,
never.
Which is their 5-year target. There is no chance. And by the way, they need 1.2 million new houses over the next 5 years based on what was previously considered to be the medium-term immigration numbers, which has already been blown out of the water.
100%.
So, so therefore I do think if we go back to, the next election, I do believe there is a big chance that the government will call an election before the end of this year. And I don't know what the timing works. I don't know how long caretaker periods work, but I would say watch this space in the next month.
Well, yeah.
That's what I think.
I don't dispute that. I
think, and it is becoming a personality game, as you said. It's about keeping Albanese clean.
Mm.
So you don't see Albanese talk about any of these things.
No, he uses his attack dogs.
He's running the Kamala Harris style.
Yeah.
And he's using Jim to attack on this or, Penny Wong to attack on that or someone else attack. So they're Tony all the baddies.
Yeah.
But we just keep him pretty happy. And I wonder, I put it back to you.
Mm.
Do you think Australians will buy that? I mean, do you think Australians are like American voters?
No, I don't. Well, it's compulsory, so it's different in that regard.
But do you think we're more wired into the games that people play?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we are skeptical, very skeptical by nature. Yes, very untrusting of politicians. There's got to be something. What's the hidden agenda here?
That would be the least trusted people, I think. In our country, right
maybe
now.
next to me, but yeah, definitely
journalists and media politicians,
car salesmen. Yeah, we're all in that. No, I think that's right. I think that Australians also would be very wary about kicking a government out after one term,
right?
Because they don't we believe in a fair go, right? So we want to give them a chance at having a crack. But just to your point earlier, people are hurting, and they're hurting when the power bill arrives. They're hurting when they see how much the mortgage is or how much their rent's gone up. And rightly or wrong, well, actually, they can sheet that home to this government, and the reason is because they actually fought the last election on the cost of living, how it's going up under Morrison.
So will your paper prosecute that? I mean, is that what you do? Is that what your paper, your news outlets will? Do you, as the main editor guy, did you say to your team, "Well, let's call this out. Because that's news.
Let's call them both out."
Yeah, okay, but Liberals didn't say anything.
No, but then again, they're going to present their pitch to the nation, and we have to interrogate that.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, definitely. I think it's a mistake to. It was a little bit like The Voice. So we didn't declare our hand on where we stood on The Voice. We just chased the story, and
watched the developments.
Yeah, watched the developments, and very much Australians just made up their own minds. They didn't need any guidance from us or anyone else. That they determined that. I think it can be overstated the influence that papers have on how people vote on election day. It's important. It's one element, but I'm in a game where the game I'm in is actually being trustworthy and actually presenting our journalism has to be above reproach. Particularly with the onslaught from social media, that's our point of difference. Is that we've got professional journalists who live in your community. They pay the same bills. They drive cars on the same roads. That's our point of difference. Is
that because social media journalism
yes,
is not edited, is not controlled?
Well, it's derivative from us, so they rip our journalism off.
But then they put their own spin on it.
No, they just don't live here. What they'll do is they don't put a spin on it. They just shove it up there and just let the algorithm do its work, right? But my point is that they're not here.
Yeah,
they're in, they're in California somewhere.
And do you think? I mean, if you were asked to advise Anthony, who, by the way, I've met him once or twice, but from what people tell me who have met him, he's a good bloke,
lovely bloke.
He's like, I don't really know him well.
We've been to footy a few times together. He's a great footy. He
loves his South Sydney. He loves his side. He loves footy generally. I mean, he comes from a really humble beginnings. I mean, I like his whole story. I get
That's terrific, yeah.
But if you're an influential person, would you suggest to him that he actually should expose himself to more media? Because he doesn't really do that much media unless it's very controlled. He gives you the sound bites. But actually, I don't really remember seeing him sit down with anybody for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't think he's not as he's not on the level of some of the American politicians. He's certainly a lot more available than that. He does a lot of stand-ups, a lot more doorstops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have that criticism of him. I think, for example, if we said, mate, we want to do a sit-down with you in 3 weeks' time,
he'd do it.
We'd probably get it.
Okay.
I wouldn't criticise him on that front at all.
And what do you think about Dutton then? Is Dutton playing the reverse game? Is Dutton just saying, I'm not going to say too much?
Yeah.
You talked about nuclear, I get that. But other than that, I don't need to say too much. I just let Anthony.
I think he's been very, very disciplined. And to your point, he's kind of been very selective about when he talks. And that's obviously a deliberate strategy because you can sound very shrill very quickly. We saw that with Jodie Mackay in New South Wales. I mean, that was a disaster because she was just bagging everything. And then you see Chris Minns, who's actually incredible.
Incredibly measured.
Incredibly, but also magnanimous. He's very happy to give credit where it's due.
Oh, I saw him at the opening of the Martin Place Railway, like the what do we call this, rail link thing?
Yeah, the Metro. Yeah,
and he congratulated Dom and he congratulated Gladys.
Yeah,
which you're right, it's magnanimous. Actually, because he's actually a really decent person.
Oh, he is.
Not suggesting anybody else is not, but he's a very decent guy.
Yeah, he is, and
smart,
very smart, and. When you look at Chris Minns, you don't actually see the Labor brand on him, right?
Yeah, that's clever.
Yeah, it's sort of like what you see is just him instinctively responding to things, and I think that he's a new brand of politician in that respect, and it's incredibly effective. The opposition cannot lay a glove on him.
No, well, no one even knows who's. I mean, we know who Speakman's. We know who his opposite number is, but Well, I know, but a lot of people wouldn't know. And Chris is sort of put himself out there. He's so far ahead of everybody. He's like 10 seconds ahead of everybody else in the 200 metres.
Yeah.
He's so far out ahead.
Yeah.
It's like he's the only one in the race.
But he's also, I think he's also enough of a realist to know that can end very quickly. So I think he's very determined and disciplined at the moment. He knows that this housing crisis will just swallow him up and spit him out unless he stays on top of it.
So I guess it brings us to the story of is it Warwick Farm or Rose Hill?
Rose Hill.
Rose Hill.
Yeah.
That's a shit fight. And
Well,
poor old Peter V'landys is being dragged into it.
yeah. Whereas in fact it's the Australian Turf Club.
Yeah. So it's not him.
No, he's a regulator.
Yeah.
So it's the Turf Club that owns Rose Hill. But of course that was an opportunity for V'landys' detractors to use this as an excuse to have a crack at him.
Which has sort of worked.
Yeah, well, to an extent.
But Mins backs him or backs the idea.
Well, I think it's a good idea. I think, and he recognises it. It's not a good idea. It's a great idea.
Well, it's compulsory because we need more housing.
We need more housing. And it's definitely the most attractive tract of land where people want to live in Sydney, in the basin.
Yeah.
And you can get 25,000 homes in there. The metro will go through there and you'll basically safeguard the racing industry for the next half a century, if not more.
So how do the controversy get legs?
Well, I think that the ATC would probably, if they had their time again, have approached it differently. They would have done a lot more stakeholder engagement.
Like as in consultations?
100%. They should have spoken to the trainers and actually presented the vision of where they want to take racing. And I don't think they necessarily did that as well as they might have liked.
So when that story comes into the editorial room, or whatever you call it, the morning meeting.
Sure.
What do you do? What's your first reaction to that? You rub your hands.
Well, yeah, a bit of that. But it's a stunning piece of stunning revelation.
We got premiers and
everything.
Chairman of the NRL,
Yeah.
names,
massive, yeah, and also like Rose Hill there is incredible sentimental attachment to it. The Golden Slipper's been there for more than 60 years, and so yeah, what do I do when that happens? It's like, right, let's get our heads around it. What do we think? We just basically do what you do with any yarn. Let's get the facts. And then the answers will sort of make themselves apparent.
So do you get sort of is there a nervousness about the urgency because we've got to get this up? Did you say?
Oh yeah,
you got 2 hours or?
So I got an expression. I probably shouldn't say what it is, but basically let's call it fast and dirty, which is basically get the yarn up,
get something up straight away,
get it up,
yeah,
right, and then let's build on it.
Yeah, refine.
Because it is a game of speed.
Yeah, so the speed is quick. Quickness is important.
Yeah, because your SEO, search engine optimization authority, is determined by one important component is speed.
Right.
That the engine determines that you've got more authority if you're first.
Right.
So speed is very, very important.
Yeah. So the digital world's changed things a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just sort of take your time. You've got to get it up. And then continue to add to the richness of the story. And, there's a whole lot of components that go into that.
So, and just one final question. I mean, do you see anybody or anything out there that can disrupt between the two main news outlets, which is Nine and News Corp or Daily Telegraph?
Yeah.
Do you think there's some threat there? Because I remember many, many years ago when Don Argus was the CEO of NAB.
Yeah.
Don Argus was asked this question. It was in the AFR. It was in 2002 or 3.
Yeah.
And they said, what keeps you awake at night in terms of the banks controlling the market?
Yeah.
And his answer to that was, funnily enough, someone like General Electric coming to the marketplace.
Yeah.
And becoming a bank.
Yeah.
And of course, they bought my business.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I read it, I went straight to them.
Genius.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. But if I'm asking you the same question today, what worries you most? What keeps you awake?
Where I went to straight away was retail media.
What's that mean though? What's retail media?
Well, you mentioned Amazon, right?
Yeah, okay.
Amazon's got enormous retail media. On through all their assets, they've got content. And they could easily just, they will hoover up a lot of attention, a lot of revenue that way. So Woolworths has their own media. They have their own, digital magazine, physical magazines. All of the big companies have that, and they're hoovering up revenue as well as the social media
as
outlets.
an advertising revenue.
Advertising, but
or subscription.
No, advertising revenue.
Yep.
Absolutely, to reach play,
yep.
Engagement, and so that they're hiring journalists. Banks are hiring journalists. They're all hiring journalists. So what keeps me up at night, I suppose, is that, and the other corollary to that is talent. It's so hard to hold on to and attract talented journalists because they all go to uni. I might do a communications course, and all the lecturers are saying, "Oh, don't go to the media. There's no future in it." Well, of course, there's a future in it, but they just don't see that in the universities. So the pipeline of talent's one of the toughest things.
And does that mean, therefore, Ben, that perhaps you need to, the word infiltrate sort of comes to mind, but engage with the universities?
Yeah, we are.
Go and see someone like David Gonski and say, look, how can we assist?
So we do that. We've got campus partnerships with, in Sydney we've got 3 campus partnerships, Western Sydney, and Newcastle.
What about UNSW?
No, I haven't got them yet. If you can help me out.
I can. David, who's I'm an alumni there, and David would definitely be interested in talking to you.
Terrific. Okay, great. We'll take that offline.
Yeah, no, totally.
Brilliant. And that involves us giving, guest lectures, getting the students to come and they do internships. Yep. And we certainly we give a free subscription to the students, and we try to serve up content that's relevant to them. And hopefully that's an investment in, future, full-blown subscribers, that you get that sort of pipeline of engagement. So that's absolutely critical to our mission to remain, viable.
Because you're right. I mean, unless a software can write it for you, which perhaps may be the case one day, but right now, in order to be a news business, you have to have talent to write the news. Yeah,
you do, and it's all the more precious. That, as I said at the outset, I'm fortunate to have a good team. But you can't take that for granted. I probably spend, you asked me, actually the first question you asked is, what do I do? I probably spend, 4 hours out of every 10 on talent development.
Wow.
And my team. It's absolutely critical.
Have you got an aging talent pool?
No, it's a good mix.
Is it?
It's a good mix. We've got a good cadetship program. I'm fortunate. I mean, that's actually the money from Google to license our content pays for our cadetship program, and it's so critical because it's sort of injecting that fresh blood. But then we've also got the grizzled old journos that are there too, who are fantastic.
Well, that's only sort of says that your retention's been very good. I mean, because everything's about recruitment and retention. So maybe the recruitment's more difficult because there's less a pool to recruit from. There's more people trying to hit that pool.
Yeah, you're right. Retention is critical.
Your retention's. I mean, if I look at. You mentioned Mike Caranis, which one of the younger rugby league journalists. I mean, I don't know how old Michael is. Maybe he's 40. I don't know.
Sure.
But then you got Buzz, who's my age. Buzz 100. Buzz, do you hear that? But you've still got him there.
Yeah.
Because to keep Michael, you need to have.
Absolutely.
He wants to look. He looks up to Buzz.
100%.
You know what I mean? And that's sort of. If he wasn't there, it's going to be hard to get a whole lot of footy journalists.
He's the inspiration. And it's the same with Mark Morey as our crime editor.
Yeah.
And then Josh Hanrahan, who's just freakishly good. And they're like, the odd couple, but they work together well.
Mark Morey's got a head for crime.
He does, doesn't he?
He's just I look at him, he's on TV. I can't remember where I see him now. It's probably on some
He's on TikTok
screen.
a lot. Just ask him.
Yeah, and I think he's got a head for a crime writer.
Oh, he's brilliant.
And just on that, quick. I mean, I've been going too long. I'm getting wound up, but just on that, I remember in the days when Hardo was there. We were talking about a long time ago. They were always connected with the cops.
Yeah.
And, they did a lot with the police because, they needed to get
that's
information.
That's still the case.
It still works that way.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, because
it works both ways.
Yeah, correct. Because sometimes the police want something.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean we don't hold them to account.
Yeah.
But you definitely have to have a strong relationship and have that back channel ability to have those back channel conversations.
Yeah, and what doesn't really compromise you anyway, because just because you're talking to the crime commander for New South Wales, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to support the commissioner if she's in the in the headlines for some reason.
That's right.
And because the head of crime, he'll still talk to you because he knows there's a need for that.
That's right.
So I sort of get that. But the old days are pretty close. I mean, I haven't really been, around.
Yeah.
I'm still involved with the police, but in terms of I do stuff for them.
Yes.
But do you still play that game? Sort of.
Yeah, very much.
So Mark Murray would sort of be talking to
all the time.
Yeah,
and me too. It's really important to have those relationships because it also I have to have a very strong contact book and be constantly in contact with a lot of external parties. Otherwise, you asked me before, how do I have a sense of what's important? I have to be out and about a lot.
Yeah.
And
so does that mean your life is sort of, you're always on?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun.
So night times you got to go to functions.
Yeah.
But
you try to
right down to the sort of Dally-Ms and does it get to that level?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's an important one.
Yeah. So that's cool. But that means you're incredibly busy then. Like if you're kicking off early in the morning, because you've got to be around when people are talking to you, but then you've got to sort of do the schmoozing sort of stuff. I mean, it's sort of PR type of thing, but you've got to be present and relevant.
You got to be present. You got to see and be seen, and I think it's really important. So that's how you establish trust as well.
Enjoying it?
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best job. I've got the best job in Sydney. I love it. It's so great.
Yeah. And what's do you ever worry about burnout?
Every day.
Yeah. You feel exhausted.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of cocoon a bit on the weekends where I can. You just sort of, you're not really.
But what does someone like you do to just to flip it a little bit just to relax?
To decompress. Yeah. I surf.
Like actually on a board or something?
Yeah, on a board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And do you live in Sydney?
Yeah, I live in South Coogee, so I surf at Maroubra.
Okay.
And, that's just great. You're in the wilderness and no one can call you.
Have you always surfed?
Yeah, since I was about 7 or 8.
Our producer was sitting across there. He used to be a journalist at Tracks.
Yeah, I was talking to him. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I dreamt of. That's the dream job.
Yeah?
Yeah.
He was a journalist at Tracks, but he left, mate, because he saw the light. He decided to come to Straight Talk.
Much better.
So you could have done that if you were 25, 35, maybe 40 years younger. You could have done the same thing.
Where did it all go wrong?
Mate, good to see you.
You too, mate. Thanks so much.